We have seen Chinese artists respond to political change since the Yuan dynasty, when the literati made ink and brush painting a form of resistance and resilience. We saw Xi Tao, an individualist painter, express his alienation from the Qing regime with a deeply personal sense of free-flowing ink. So it was certainly part of Chinese art to make political statement. But in the age of Mao's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, art wasn't just making a political statement. It was functioning to mobilize the masses, to persuade them to unify under a certain ideological system and to believe absolutely in the righteousness of communist rule. That righteousness rested on an extremist view of the past as corrupt and deserving destruction. So here in this propaganda poster titled "Destroy the Old World, Build a New World," the image literally does violence to the past. That's not what Xi Tao did. He did not want to destroy the past. He wanted to renew it and reinvent it, to keep it alive as part of his authentic heritage. In this propaganda poster, the worker, with his armband showing that he belongs to the Communist Red Guard Army, is using a sledgehammer and his boot to crush and shatter a sculpture of the Buddha, Jesus, and the Confucianist classics. In other words, all tradition that had been the source of meaning for thousands of years was to be destroyed in order for the people to be liberated from oppression. That's the message of the propaganda. After Mao's death in 1976, China, under Deng Xiaoping, gradually liberalized its economy. So it transformed from a Maoist command and control centralized economy run by the Communist Party to a more open market economy that engaged in international trade and allowed for capitalist investment. So this produced a massive economic boom, raising the standard of living for millions of Chinese people. For the artists of China, this instigated a really brilliant period in which many Chinese artists became boldly experimental, making art forms that merged multiple image traditions to evoke and provoke an awareness of the conflict between the ideologies of capitalism and communism, between propaganda and critique, between the past and the present. So an artist like Wang Guangyi synthesizes the traditional, and here it's the communist tradition, image of the communist worker with his beefy outstretched arm, his clenched fist suggesting militant strength. He merges that with this conflicting element, the corporate logo for Coca-Cola. There's a witty joke here about visual culture in China around the 1990s, in which the high art tradition that had combined word and image, the high art tradition of calligraphy, painting, and poetry, has now become a low art mixture of propaganda and advertising, where the text is the text of mass culture, of political ideology, and of advertising logos. The cohort of Chinese artists that emerged onto the international art scene roughly in the late 80s and through the 1990s are widely considered among the most provocative and important artists of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. And this painting by Yu Minjun is a good example of why. Titled "Freedom Leading the People," it is an oil on canvas, a Western traditional material, and it is overtly political since it quotes the very famous French painting "Liberty Leading the People," commemorating a popular revolt in France in 1830. So Yu Minjun recapitulates Eugène Delacroix's use of the upraised arm as a symbol of popular uprising and militant commitment to the revolutionary cause, recapitulates the image of coming over the barricades, which is what's happening here. The people revolting against the French government had constructed barricades out of the cobblestones, and they're leaping over the barricades implicitly toward freedom with the dead bodies at their feet. But there is something disturbing about Yu Minjun's painting. There's also something disturbing about Delacroix, but let's focus on Chinese art in the 1990s. What's disturbing is that we're not exactly sure what we are supposed to feel. What are these emotions? What are we seeing? What's going on? And what are these strange smiles among the people strewn on the ground like corpses, but still alive with this uncanny robotic smile, as well as every single person charging forward. So these figures smiling, these absurdly expansive smiles, as if they are so amped up on their intoxicating joy that they are on the verge of hysteria. Those smiles resemble the impossibly huge and bright smiles of propaganda peasants, right, with their polished, perfect teeth as white as marshmallows. They also resemble all those big smiles in any capitalist advertisement you'll find on the internet, where someone's using their debit card and it makes them smile, some huge smile. And yet these smiles are unnerving because we see this dark, gaping opening, which could be a scream. And as we look more closely, we notice that each figure is the exact same figure repeated, wearing the same clothes. The t-shirts and shorts could be Western casual wear, like the summer season line that you would buy at the Gap. And yet those gray and white colors also make the clothing read like uniforms, perhaps prison uniforms. This is in some sense the opposite of propaganda, although it uses the realism, the realistic shading, light, the realistic or illusionistic representation that we know from propaganda, but it uses it against itself, because Yu Minjun's painting leaves unclear what all of this represents. Propaganda tries to coerce the viewer into feeling completely simple, ideal emotions. The artists working in contemporary China are artists who are thinking about dissent, and they're expressing that through ambiguity, conflict, and a sense of unease instead of the reassurances that propaganda traditionally provides. One of the most creative Chinese artists to deal with the contradictions and ambiguities of life in contemporary China is Xu Bing. And probably his most impactful work is the installation he created in the late 1980s titled A Book from the Sky. You see here a photograph of the installation with its many parts consisting of multiple printed volumes and scrolls. Most dramatically, a giant scroll hangs suspended from the ceiling, reminding us of the power of scale. And in fact, modernity is very much about forces operating on a vaster scale than humans had previously known. So in this installation, Xu Bing uses wood block prints to make these printed scrolls and volumes. So he's working in the tradition of printmaking that had developed in China and Korea around 1000 CE. And he's using the traditional Chinese reverence for text as an art form. In an ironic twist, Xu Bing did not print these scrolls and volumes using Chinese characters. Instead, he invented basically a fake Chinese. Characters that to an untrained eye resemble Chinese characters, but are in fact the Latin alphabet. That Latin alphabet, the Western alphabet, masquerading as Chinese. So he calls his invented script square script. And like Yu Minjun, it leaves us puzzled and pondering conflicting meanings and emotions. Is this a witty take on the meeting of Chinese and English? Is this implying the loss of China's heritage in a globalized world where English dominates business transactions? Certainly, he wants us to think of the arts of the brush, of the scroll format, as an expressive space for cultivated literati aesthetics. And we could see his invented characters as the ultimate version of self-expression, taking Shen Zhou's expressive marks and Shi Tao's individualism to the extreme, perhaps the absurd extreme. From another perspective, Zhu Bao makes this esteemed tradition of literary expression become illegible, as if the meaning of the characters that have such ancient heritage have been lost in a new, garbled language. Contemporary Chinese art is a rich and expansive topic. We will end by turning to the renowned and versatile artist Ai Weiwei. His constant experimentation has earned him acclaim on the national art stage. You may remember that I first showed this work in his hands when we began our first module on ancient Chinese art history, and I showed you this very slide to compare the Yuan dynasty porcelain vase from the Jingdezhen kilns, which became imperial producers for the Ming court, to the porcelain sunflower seeds that Ai Weiwei installed in the Tate Gallery, London. It took an army of 1,600 Chinese artisans from today's pottery factories at Jingdezhen to create Ai Weiwei's 100 million hand-painted porcelain seeds. And in your next reading task, you will learn more about this installation and hear Ai Weiwei talking about what his art of dissent and innovation means